여보세요. Eve, Psyche, and the Bluebeard's wife. I haven't heard this song yet. What I did see though, right? It was kind of funny. Yoonchae has the Star Diary series, right, where she interviews other idols, other groups and stuff, and she had Yoona from ITZY on the show, right? And they were talking about each other's work, being fans of, each one being a fan of the other's group and everything. And I know they were talking about this song. Yoona could not remember the title of the song, right? And admittedly, it's quite uncommon, right? Like it's a very interesting song title, Eve, Psyche, and the Bluebeard's wife. It's like I have no idea what the song is about, right? From the title it seems very narrative. It seems very thematic. It's almost like the title of a book, right? Or perhaps a movie. So you anticipate that there are going to be characters, Eve, Psyche, and then whoever the Bluebeard's wife happens to be, right? It's almost like the Canterbury Tales or something, right? You got the knight, and then you got the Bluebeard's wife, and then you got the you know what I mean? Like it's one of those things. So I have no idea, right? But that was a funny exchange though, right? Because she was like she couldn't remember the title of the song, and then later on, Yeji and Yoona were doing a live. I think it was probably on Instagram, or it might have been on Bubble Live, but they were live streaming together from the dorms, and Yeji was like, "Oh, I just want to apologize on behalf of Yoona because she couldn't remember the name of the song." And she was like, "But don't worry, because Yoona forgets the names of our songs too sometimes, you know." And but hey, it's understandable. It's understandable. She knew the song, like she heard the song and everything, but the title, she's like, I can't remember the name of the song. But this should be interesting, man. I've been wondering, like, what the heck does this mean? Eve, Psyche, and the Bluebeard's wife. Okay, so let's check it out. It's like it makes me think pirates, like the Bluebeard's wife. That's what it makes me think, right? It sounds like some sort of pirate name or something, right? Bluebeard the pirate or something. So automatically the scenery is like, it's totally not what I'm expecting.
I'm a mess, 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 mess. I'm a mess, 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 mess. I'm a mess in distress, but we're still the best. Stress, fearless, say yes. We don't dress to impress. 괜찮단 듯 뭐래도 거짓말인 걸 난 알아. 괜찮겠지 뭐래도 착한 얼굴에 네 말 잘 들을 땐 괜찮잖아 그런 건. 내 룰은 나만 정할래, yeah. 있어 더 인형이 되렴 덮어다 감정 따윈 다 시도 난 인형이 아냐 찡그린데도 그것도 나야 보지만 안 보고파 날 둘러싼 이 금기들 yeah. 그날의 이불처럼 Take it on the chain I know I like that Boom 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 내 심장이 뛰네 Get it like boom 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 Get it like boom 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 내 심장이 뛰네 Get it like boom 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 Get it like boom 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 I wish it was forbidden Get it like boom 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 Get it like boom 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 I wish for what's forbidden Get it like boom 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 Get it like boom 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 What you waiting for 이게 따라가면 we far 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 What you looking for 원한다면 now we fall Boom 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 내 심장이 뛰네 Get it like boom 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 Get it like boom 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 내 심장이 뛰네 Get it like boom 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 Get it like boom 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 Girl wanna have fun Girl wanna have fun Get it like boom 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 Get it like boom 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 Girl wanna have fun Girl wanna have fun Get it like boom 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 Get it like boom boom boom
SSerafim.
Oops. So, the title doesn't seem to really have too much to bear on what the song actually is. At least, on the first listen, it seemed to be a very stylistic combination of elements, right? Even this, this roller skating scenes in the beginning, sort of like those are old school skates too, man. Those are like the 4-wheel types, and so incorporating a little bit of this additional choreography, right, with these roller skaters here. What I really hear in the song is a lot of this style that it's what New Jeans does, right? And I've been calling this for a while because they seem to be setting a lot of the tone for what fourth gen, is sort of moving towards now, and it's a matter of differentiating from third gen K-pop groups, which incorporated a lot of very well established sounds, modern sounds, everything from pop, rock, hip hop, R&B, Motown, funk, disco, classical, folk, like all of those different stylings, which were very prominent over 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, right? In mainstream popular music. The movement away from that with fourth gen, there were many different sounds. ITZY had a very, synth heavy, saturated sound in their early work, which is it's great, right? I love early ITZY music, right? Those first albums that were released, even in like None of My Business, there's a little bit of this, smooth type of sound, right, that's incorporated. It's not quite reaching for New Jeans so directly, or that type of sound anyways, but the groups are sort of moving in that direction. SSerafim, the earlier stuff, what was it? Impurities, right? That was straight up R&B, like 90s R&B even. And some of the other songs, you know, were this like a sort of minimalistic synth-centric type of pop sound, right? But very cool, like very stylish, you know, with really great vocal harmonies. But I'm hearing like a lot more of that New Jeans sort of D&B, you know, club with some airy vocal work over the top, especially in, I guess it's the hook section, right? It starts right in the beginning. When it moves to the verse, it becomes much more like centered around the bass, and there's some synth arpeggiations that are going on in the rhythm. But they keep this structure with a lot of independent vocal lines in here. The melody lines that come in on the vocal parts, you know, they're not like there's really not they don't lean into the harmonies quite so much, right? I think the emphasis seemed to be more on independent vocal melody lines. Like it's so random, right? Like it's this, it's, you know, the roller skaters, I'm sorry, and then, you know, an arrow, which is like, and she doesn't have a bow, right? But it's an arrow that had enough force to like stick into a concrete ground, you know, and then they have this obvious visual, like, aesthetic theme that they're going for with the dark colors and everything. Like it's a like almost, what would you call it, like almost a collage, like it's a mixture of different stylistic themes and elements and stuff. Heavily compressed track.
I'm a mess, 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 mess. I'm a mess, 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 mess.
So, you know, got that kick in 808, right? The sort of D&B style, that those very like airy, sort of hollow sounding synth chords that are going on over it, right? Very sort of, what's it? And 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. So pretty much hanging around quarter note rhythms. Vocal 2, mess, 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 like 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and so, but it's what New Jeans does in a lot of their tracks.
I'm a mess in distress, but we're still the best. Dress fearless, say yes, we don't dress to impress.
And then a shift here, right, in the tone, like the bass becomes massive, like it's so big, right? Like it's a complete, it's almost a quality change, right? Like, but it sounds super heavy now, and it not only is it a super heavy bass sound, but it's playing a descending sort of arpeggiation, right? It's a boom, 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 like it kind of, oh man, it feels really heavy. But the vocal, right, this independent vocal line that's going on over it, very light, right? It's a very strong contrast, and there's so much space in between. Airiness in the vocal, creating melodic lines, right? It's a very nice shape to it also, like this sort of syncopation in the rhythms, and then little things like stepping up and then down as they're going through this melody line, creating very sort of concise little high points in the line. This part right here that actually does feature vocal harmonies, though, this sounds very different, right? Like this sounds more like SSerafim. This is them. This is like even the rhythm to it, right? All of this is like their sound for sure. So again, a combination of different styles. And then, but really kind of tied together by that sort of club sound, right? Like it's very much that type of a style, right? So that bass, drum and bass sort of centric kind of club sound. But it's very cool. A lot of the choreography too, you know, this remind me of was it oh my god, was it OMG? I think so, right? But some of these like steps right there, right? So some of these vocal lines are being doubled, but I don't know necessarily if it's, you know, it seems to be that the one vocal line that's been recorded, it may be an additional track that has some reverb and some specifically engineered, you know, so like EQ that's been attached to it. So, you know, in other words, it might not necessarily be two voices, but just the one. And then what they might have done is keep pretty much the dry vocal track, and then bust that to an aux track that has the effects on there, and then pan them in a way so that like there's just enough space to give you a sort of stereo type of effect. You know, dry vocal on one side, aux track with effects on the other side. This has been done for a very long time, but it's very clean, and so you hear both tracks quite distinctly. Like it's you can really discern the difference with at the end of each line, the end of each phrase, a little bit of an accent with vocal harmonizations, but very, very light. That was cool. So that final hook section kind of developed by adding another vocal part in there, right? Girl, wanna have fun. That part, like it's filling in the space that was previously kind of created detachment in from the get it like boom 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 line. So obviously Eve as in the Garden of Eden type of thing, with the reference with the apple. I want what's forbidden, like these things. Psyche, now that I'm watching the video again, this, like, I think this setting right here, see, they were those guys rollerblading and girls, they were outside, right, this building. And then there's scenes of them running around with the flashlights or skating around with the flashlights, and they're looking through these different doors and everything. And the girls are inside of these different rooms. So they seem to be representing their headspace, their mental, their psychology, I'm still kind of lost on the Bluebeard's wife. I'll figure it out, but this is one of those songs that I'm going to have to listen to and, like, really get the lyrics and, like, go through it and, like, okay, what like, let me see what this is supposed to mean here. So there's some ideas that are represented on a more surface level, and then the Psyche is it's a concept that indicates, like, space in between, a means for moving between concepts, kind of. And the Bluebeard's wife is the most obscure to me at this point. I'm just not sure. I would have to pay. I'm trying to pay attention to the sound, right? And so I'm looking at the lyrics, but it's something where I'm trying to focus on one or the other at a time. But it's really interesting, man. And when I say, these groups, like, I don't mean that they're just straight up copying New Jeans or whatever. That's not what I mean, because it still sounds different. They're not New Jeans, and Itzy's not New Jeans, and they're all going to be doing different things, right? But there are certain styles and certain sounds that get incorporated, and from what I know, it was like, I recognize it as something that New Jeans had used first. It may just be a matter of, like, when I hear the different groups at different times, because I, jumped into this and was like, okay, I had to figure out what was third gen and what was second gen and what's fourth gen, so I mean, it could be unique to my perspective, kind of, but I still can look at earlier SSerafim stuff and see that this wasn't a stylistic application back then, and it seemed to be, since this is more recent of a release, that they have moved towards this type of style. It's a great style. Like, when New Jeans does it, it's fantastic. That's why they're so popular. You know what I mean? Like, this is a good sound. And to go off of my point from earlier, so differentiating from third gen, which used a lot of those more mainstream established sounds from the earlier decades, this type of club sound was a little bit more niche, right? It was popular, but it wasn't exactly mainstream, right? It wasn't until way later, post 2000s, in the advent of, like, iTunes and all these, the online internet-based type of music platforms, that people really started to get access, because a lot of these early club sounds, D&B and stuff, it was the people in the clubs that knew it. You know what I mean? Like they're the ones who were into this, and so if you didn't really hang out there, and if you didn't go looking for different sounds, it wasn't something that was, like, readily available, right? So it makes sense for fourth gen to differentiate itself from third gen by moving into sounds and styles like this, right? It's a very logical direction for this to move in, and it's done really well. Like, this is good. This is solid, and it's SSerafim's approach to incorporating that type of sound into their music, right? It's their approach. This is how they do it, right? And but you know, I'm sure they'd probably acknowledge a nod to New Jeans. I mean, they're contemporaries with each other. They're probably friends, more than likely. You know what I mean? So there's nothing negative about that. It's not a bad thing. You know, if I if I had a band, and you know, I had friends that were in other bands, and it's like, oh, you know, they do those songs, and man, they really have like, you know, I love the way that they write those guitar parts. Or I love the percussion in that. I love like that whole instrumental arrangement is really good, man. I want to do something like that. You know what I mean? And it not to copy them, but I'm like inspired by it, and I'm like acknowledging like that's really cool, man. I see what you're doing, and I want to experiment with it a little bit. I want to experience what that's like, right? To do something like that. So there isn't anything wrong with it, and I think that it makes sense, and I think we'll continue to see fourth gen groups, you know, moving in this direction for now. Eventually there will be another one of these styles or sounds that is not like those really popular mainstream sounds from the past decades, but it will be something like this D&B club sound. It'll be something that was like popular but maybe not quite mainstream in that earlier time period, but it'll be familiar enough so that when it gets incorporated, you know, people will be drawn to it. It'll have a natural interesting quality to its sound. I don't know what it'll be. It will probably be pretty because when you really get down to it, we have like intricate system of subgenres of music, right? That especially once you get into electronic digital sounds, you know, and it's one of those things that happen. If you look at classical music, you know, you can see the same thing whenever, like, there was a Baroque period, so all these different composers wrote music in a certain way, and there's counterpoint, and there's sort of elaborate type of rhythmic patterns and things that you'll find all throughout, but each one is like its own original idea. And the same thing with classicism and romanticism. Like, there was a new way of writing music, but everybody had to think of something, their own idea that they were going to write in that style then, right? So it's the same thing, just in the, you know, you move ahead in time and we get digital music and we get electronic sounds. And so it created like a very large in scope, sort of like a tree of like, okay, here we started with synthesizers and drum machines, and then you get all the way down to dubstep and D&B and EDM and you know, all these different, right, from earlier trance and electronica, and like all these things move in stages, right? So there will be another sound that emerges eventually, and it will be incorporated into a lot of the music for sure. But this is a super interesting track, man. It like they decided to do something really interesting with this, from the title all the way through the mix. You know what I mean? It's very cool. It's very cool, man. It's I dig the mix. I dig the vocals, the choreography. It's very cool, man. Like, it's super cool. It's fun, and really it's nice when something is fun and a little bit of a puzzle to try and figure out, right? Because it keeps you coming back to it, right? Until, you know, you just want to like understand it, right? And really sort of have a grasp of it. But it's very cool, man. I think they did a absolutely awesome job on this. What's the painting, right? Oh man, what is the painting? It's just one of those things that, you know, I'm very curious about. It becomes something, you know, to linger on that shot for a while. It's like that painting has something to do with it, you know. So that's another one of these things that, like, later on I'm gonna look into this and start to identify some of these elements and see how well I can articulate the concept and such. But super interesting, man, super interesting. This makes me want to, like, really get into the albums, right? Like, I want to listen to the first SSerafim album, and then the first New Jeans album, and then the next one, and then the next one, and so on, and, you know, see track for track, mix for mix, how these, because obviously these two groups, I'd say they're kind of at the forefront of 4th gen for now, at least in terms of popularity. So it would be really interesting to compare the ideas. But man, this was interesting. I had no idea where it was going to go or what it was going to do based off of the title, but it's fun. It's a good time, and it's incredibly interesting. SSerafim, Eve, Psyche, and the Bluebeard's wife. Strangely enough, I don't have a problem remembering the name of the song, and now that I finally have the sound, it's only going to stick even more. But what a really, really awesome work by SSerafim. Really cool, man. Really cool.